The little girl stood at the edge of the corral, her bare feet dusted red from the dry earth. She couldn't have been more than 8, thin, sunburnt, hair tied back with a fraying ribbon. "Sir," she said softly, tugging on the rancher's sleeve, "my mommy wants to see you." James Holler paused, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd been mending a fence all morning, alone except for the creak of leather and the distant bawl of cattle. He looked down at her, those big brown eyes, too wide for her small face. "Where's your folks?" he asked. She just pointed toward the cottonwoods by the creek. Something in her gaze, earnest, but edged with a strange kind of fear, made James set his hammer down and follow. They walked in silence, the girl holding the ragged hem of her dress as if afraid to trip. James kept a cautious distance, scanning the horizon. Out here, strangers didn't just show up without reason. The girl led him to a small clearing by the water. A wagon sat there, worn and splintered, one wheel badly cracked. A mule grazed nearby, ribs showing. Inside the wagon, a woman sat propped against a blanket, her face pale, her hands trembling as she tried to hide a cough. When she saw James, her eyes filled with relief and shame. "You're the rancher from over the ridge?" she asked, her voice raw. James nodded. The girl, her daughter, looked between them, clutching her ragged doll tight. "She said you'd help," the girl whispered. James felt the weight of her words settle heavy in his chest. He didn't know these people, didn't owe them a thing. But something about the woman's face, the hollow cheeks, the desperate strength in her eyes, kept him rooted to the spot. The woman drew a shaky breath. "My name's Clara. My husband, he's gone. Fever took him 2 weeks back." James glanced at the broken wagon, the mule too weak to pull it. "We tried to make it to town," she continued. "Didn't get far." The little girl pressed closer to her mother, as if bracing for disappointment. James looked at them, two strangers stranded on the edge of nowhere, and he knew, deep down, that this wasn't just another meeting on the trail. Whatever choice he made next would change everything. James crouched beside the wagon, the leather of his gloves creaking as he rested his hands on his knees. "You sick too?" he asked Clara. She shook her head faintly. "Just weak. Ain't had proper food in days." The girl watched him carefully, eyes sharp despite her small frame. "What's your name?" James asked her. "Ella," she said softly. James offered her a faint smile. "Well, Ella, you got a strong name." She didn't smile back. James glanced at the mule again. Too bony, its eyes dull. "That thing won't take you another mile. You stay out here, you won't last." Clara swallowed hard. "I know." James stood, brushing the dust from his pants. "I can bring you to my place," he said slowly. "It ain't much, but it's better than this." Clara hesitated, shame flickering in her eyes. "I don't want your charity." "It ain't charity," James replied. "It's just the right thing to do." They packed what little the family had. Some blankets, a few dented pots, a Bible wrapped in cloth. James hitched the mule to his wagon and helped Clara climb inside, her body frail as paper in his hands. Ella sat close to her mother, still holding that ragged doll like it was the only thing keeping her brave. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Dust rose in the hot wind, and James's mind churned. He knew what folks in town would say if they found out. A single rancher taking in a widow and her girl. Whispers had a way of turning cruel. But each time he glanced back and saw Clara's pale face, Ella's small hand clutching her mother's, he knew he couldn't leave them. That night, James made stew from the last of his beef and potatoes. Clara ate slowly, Ella faster, as if afraid the food might vanish. "You can stay a while," James said finally, breaking the silence. "Long as you need." Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining with something between gratitude and pride. "You don't know us," she whispered. James shook his head. "Don't need to." But even as the words left his mouth, a nagging thought crept in. Out here, kindness wasn't free, and trouble had a way of finding those who opened their doors too wide. From the ridge, James thought he heard the distant echo of hooves. Too far to see, but enough to stir an old, uneasy feeling in his gut. He told himself it was nothing, but deep down he knew better. By morning, the wind had shifted. Dust curled across the plains, carrying with it the faint sound of hooves. James stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Down in the valley, 3 riders were making their way toward the ranch. Slow, deliberate, like men who already knew what they'd find. He felt Ella's small hand tug his sleeve. "They're comin', aren't they?" James glanced down. The girl's face was pale, but her eyes were steady. "Who are they?" he asked. She hesitated. "Bad men. The kind that don't forgive easy." James's jaw tightened. Inside, Clara sat at the table, shoulders hunched as she tried to mend Ella's dress with shaking hands. When James stepped in, she looked up and read his face instantly. "They found us," she said. James set the rifle on the table. "Who are they?" "My husband," Clara began, then faltered. Before the fever took him, he worked for a man named Rourke. Mean bastard. They stole cattle, whiskey, money. He left that life, but they didn't take kindly to it. James felt the weight of it settle like a stone in his chest. "Those men outside," Clara whispered. "They think we owe them. They'll take me. Maybe worse." James looked at her, at Ella clutching her doll in the doorway. He could send them away, pretend none of this was his concern. But the image of Clara's hollow face, Ella's desperate courage, held him still. "You two stay inside," he said. Clara shook her head. "You can't fight them alone." James checked the rifle, snapping it shut with a click that echoed in the quiet room. "Don't matter," he said softly. "They came to my door. That makes it my fight now." The riders reached the yard, their horses snorting in the dry wind. The lead man, tall, lean, with a cruel grin, called out, "Afternoon, rancher. We're here for the woman. Best step aside." James stepped out, rifle leveled. "She ain't yours to take." The man chuckled. "We ain't a skin, friend." The standoff stretched, the air so still James could hear Ella's sharp breaths behind him. And James Holler knew, in that quiet, heavy moment, there was no walking away clean. Not anymore. The lead rider dismounted slowly, his spurs jingling in the dry air. His hand hovered near the pistol on his hip, a cruel smile tugging at his mouth. "You got guts, rancher," he drawled. "But guts don't stop bullets." James kept the rifle leveled, his finger steady on the trigger. "Turn around," James said evenly. "Ride out while you can." The man tilted his head, studying him. "You think this woman's worth dying for?" James didn't answer. Behind him, Ella's voice rang out, small but fierce. "She is." The rider's eyes flicked to the doorway where Ella stood clutching her doll, her chin raised like she wasn't afraid. For a second, the cruel smile faltered. "She's got fire," the man muttered. Clara stepped out then, weak but resolute. Her trembling hand rested on Ella's shoulder. "You already took my husband," she said, voice breaking but strong. "You don't get to take me too." The gang exchanged glances, their bravado slipping under the weight of her words. James spoke low, his tone like cold steel. "Last chance. You walk away, or you don't walk at all." The lead rider's grin twisted into something uglier. "Fine. Let's see how much your guts are worth." He went for his gun. James fired first. The shot cracked through the yard, the man stumbling back with a look of shock before crumpling into the dust. The other two hesitated, hands twitching toward their pistols. But James didn't flinch. "You want her too?" he barked. For a moment, neither moved. Then one swore under his breath, swung onto his horse, and spurred it hard. The other followed close behind. Silence fell. James lowered the rifle slowly, his breath ragged. Clara sagged against the doorframe, tears streaming down her face. Not from grief, but relief. Ella stepped to James's side, small fingers slipping into his calloused hand. "You didn't let them take her," she whispered. James stared out at the lifeless body in the dust. "No," he said quietly, "but it ain't over yet, because men like that didn't stay gone." And now blood had been spilled. They buried the man at the edge of the property before dawn. The ground was hard, the silence heavy. Clara watched from the porch, Ella pressed close against her side. James wiped the dirt from his hands and stared out over the horizon. The other two riders would return. Men like that didn't forgive, and they sure as hell didn't forget. He stepped onto the porch. Clara's eyes searched his face. "They'll come back," she said. James nodded. "Most likely. You could send us away," she whispered. "It'd be safer for you." James met her gaze, then looked down at Ella, her small hand still clutching that ragged doll. The same stubborn courage in her eyes that had made him follow her to that wagon in the first place. "I ain't sending you anywhere," James said. Weeks passed. James worked the land while Clara grew stronger, helping with the chores when she could. Ella laughed again. Real laughter that didn't sound like it was borrowed from another life. But every night, James sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, watching the horizon, waiting. The men never came. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was mercy. Maybe it was just the way of the West, that sometimes vengeance died quiet, forgotten in the dust. Years later, folks in town would talk about James Holler, the quiet rancher who took in a widow and her girl, though he'd owed them nothing. Some called him a fool. Others called him a good man. Ella, grown with children of her own, told it differently. "He followed me that day," she'd say softly, "and he never stopped protecting us after." And when her own children asked why, she always gave the same answer. Because out here, kindness was the rarest kind of courage.